Hi, my name is Wesley Lawton. I'm the therapist at Growing Forward Counseling based in Mount Clemens, Michigan. And I see people in office. I am able to see people outside when the weather is reasonable, and also via telehealth all across the state. And I'm happy to be back doing another video. It's been a while. I still have the goal of doing these twice a month, but it's been pretty busy, which is a good thing, but that's some adjusting on my part. And the Wi-Fi is down here in my building, and so it's a great opportunity to record a video, which doesn't require Wi-Fi, although I'll need it to upload it. So hopefully that can happen today. Uh, what I want to talk to you about today is ego, and actually about how the lack of an ego can be a problem. This is something that I haven't heard talked about explicitly before by anybody else. I'm sure I'm not the first person to ever think of it or to define it in these terms, uh, but I'm the first person that I personally know or have heard to talk about this. And I think it's something that a lot of people can relate to. I try to talk in these videos about things that I hear about multiple times from clients. And there was a period of time, I think this past fall, when it was coming up a lot. It's something that's a part of my own story, which I'll be referring to just a little bit. And there's actually an episode of the Embrace Mental Health podcast where I'm a co-host, and I talk about my story and how the whole ego issue relates to that, and the lack of developing a healthy ego. That's really the idea that I want to talk about today. So let's talk about what the ego is, because it's something that a lot of us have heard, and it can mean different things to different people depending on where you heard it from. And there's actually different concepts of the ego. One, I mean, and they're all kind of related, but one of the biggest ones comes from Sigmund Freud, who's the father of modern psychology, and he identified different parts of the unconscious self. The id, the ego, and the superego are the big ones. And for him, and I would say this is kind of underlying in other models as well, the ego is really the part of the self that has desires and drives and wants to be seen, wants to be loved, wants to be known, wants to be appreciated. There's a great song by the band Gunger called Ego, and it just talks about that. And there's this part that's just basically, I'm just off the top of my head here, but it's like, see me, love me, know me. That's what the ego is. The ego is the one who is trying to put all the selfies out on social media. The ego is the one who is always talking down about other people to make themselves look better and feel better about themselves. Those are some examples of how the ego can be unhealthy. Not that posting selfies online is inherently a bad thing, but if it's all you do, that's a problem, and you might need to examine your ego. And so, ego is also a part of a lot of spiritual traditions, especially some Eastern religions. I would say most prominently in Buddhism, it's talked about, and it's a similar kind of idea. And in these spiritual traditions, we want to transcend the ego. We want to be able to leave that behind and see how we are all actually connected. We are all one. There is no me. And this again connects to Freud's idea as well. It's me separate from everybody else. It's me being an individual, and uh, I need to be acknowledged uh, as an individual that is me. And so the spiritual idea is to transcend that and to see that actually there is no me. We are all one. We need to operate as one and be one with everything. That's a gross oversimplification, but that's kind of the basic idea. Those are a couple of concepts of ego. And uh, ego is really, at least Freud's version of it, is developed um, as really kind of in the toddler stage, the preschool, kindergarten age kind of time. That's when it's typically developed, where children become fully aware that they are a separate entity. It starts a little bit when they're babies, but mostly when they're toddlers, preschoolers around that time. And this is part of why we see children around that age really pushing limits, seeing what they can get away with, trying to assert dominance and power. And so the ego, like many things in psychology, it's not an actual thing that exists that's provable. I mean, we can see how it might light up on brain scans and say, oh, see, this relates to that and the concept of an ego. But it is just a concept. I find it to be a pretty helpful concept. And so I'm rolling with it here as if it's an actual thing that exists because it is a helpful concept. So um, many people, myself included, for quite a while in my life, did not develop um, a strong ego. I mean, I don't know that I'd say that I didn't develop an ego at all, but very, very limited. And that might sound like a good thing for people who are into the spiritual side of that, that, oh, great, that's kind of the goal, is to not have an ego, isn't it? But as Father Richard Rohr has said, who's a spiritual thinker and teacher and author, that and I'm sure others have said this too, but you need to have an ego to transcend an ego. And that if you skip right to just not having an ego in the first place, that I would say really does you more harm than good, and does more harm than good to the people in your life as well, because there never was a unique expression of a human being that is you. And uh, I think that I would say, and I would believe many would probably agree with me, that part of having a good life, a good quality of life, is having some sense of a self, that I exist. And to be able to be the best version of yourself for people around you, you need to have kind of a unique self that is present in their lives. And so that's a very vague kind of general idea of what it is. And it's hard to really get specific because everybody's unique and everybody's ego looks a little bit different. So, what are the problems with not having a healthy ego, without ever developing an ego? And by the way, what this can look like, what this can actually feel like, is important as well. The way that I realized I felt when I was in my mid 20s and realized that I was in this situation without having um, a healthy ego that had developed is basically there is no me. There is no consideration for what I want, for what I need, for my opinions. And some people who have developed a healthy ego may have a difficult time understanding this or relating to this, or seeing it as a real thing. But I'm sure that there are some people out there watching this, if I get any number, a dozen or more people to view this, who know exactly what I'm talking about, and maybe even hearing it for the first time, or one of the first times articulated, that if somebody asks you what you want, you instantly jump to, what do I think they want? Or what is the correct thing to want? If somebody, if you're trying to examine, I think about a couple funny examples from when I was a teenager. One would be, what's my taste in music? Well, I would try to identify resources that I thought, and I wouldn't put it in these words at the time, but that I thought were authoritative on music. I think for a time it might have been like Rolling Stone magazine, for existence, or for example, or other types of magazines or media outlets who were kind of seen as music curators or experts. What are the bands and the albums that they're recommending? Those are my favorite bands. And it's not an intentional thing. It's not something that I was really aware of. It was just sort of like, oh, well, what is the correct answer here? And you might be going for correctness. You might be going for pleasing other people. But it's not that you feel like you have needs and you need to shut them down, or that you aren't being acknowledged or listened to. It's just that there's nothing there to consider. You just go right to, what is kind of the best thing for the people around me? What is the correct answer? If you have some kind of a standard for a correct answer for your identity, really, for who you are and what you're about and what you like, that's what it can look like. And of course, leading into what kinds of problems it can cause. You think about relationships, you think about whether it's with family, with friends, with coworkers. And if you don't have a sense of your needs and your opinions, and your drives, then that's really going to hold you back and lead to some problems. Again, you're not going to be able to step in as an assertive, and um, really, you're not going to be able to contribute to your fullest potential in your life and in the lives of the people around you. Um, you're not going to necessarily have any strong goals that you're going to be able to pursue, or you're not going to, if you you're not going to be able to think with any kind of strength for yourself and maybe contribute to a situation or to an idea. If somebody in the situation is going to say, "Hey, maybe we should look at it differently," that's probably not going to be you. You're going to say, "Well, if everybody else thinks this, then that's what we'll go with," right? That's what's going to come very naturally to you. It can contribute to resentment because maybe you do have a very kind of a small spark of an ego in you, and that as time goes on in your relationships, that part is going to feel unmet, unheard, unappreciated. And you're going to sometimes take a look at your life and say, well, hey, why does everybody else get to have their say? Why does everybody else, why do we do what they want to do all the time? Nobody ever seems to care what I want to do. Well, that's just kind of how you've presented yourself. Not to say that you're totally at fault. It's great when other people in our lives can say, "Hey, Wesley, what do you think? What do you want?" No, no, really, like, please give an opinion here, right? It'd be great to have somebody in my life who would do that, and I do have people in my life who would do that at this point, and have at points throughout my life. But we don't always get that. A lot of times, if you are ready to just go along with what everybody else says and wants and does, then they're all too ready to accept that. It's like, well, great, that makes it easy. Thanks. um, but over time, you can start to feel that and resent that, and you can become a bitter person. And you probably would keep your resentment and bitterness to yourself for a long, long time. And it might come out in outbursts of anger. It might come out in depression, suicidal thoughts, even. It can come out in all kinds of other ways, but it's really rooted in this resentment and bitterness towards the world and towards everybody through no conscious fault of their own. They're probably not trying to exploit you and deny your needs. You're really making it difficult for them to know your needs because you don't even know your needs. And I wouldn't say again that it's your fault either, because how can you how can you express your needs when you're not even necessarily fully aware that you have those needs? So certainly it can contribute to low self-esteem. I'm not worth very much because there is no me, and so I'm going to act and live and feel as if I'm not worth very much. Uh, so I've gone over some problems that not having any kind of ego or never developing a healthy, strong ego can uh, can present. And so, what are the reasons why somebody doesn't develop a healthy ego? Well, again, I haven't heard people talk about this as a unique concept before, and so I can't really point to research. Maybe there's been research done on this, but I haven't come across it. And so I'm just going based off of my observations, not only from my own life, but from the lives of my clients and people who I've known, who I've seen this manifest, and where we've identified this lack of a self. And so, uh, some some suspects that I would say are common, usual suspects. Probably the biggest one is if you have if you grew up with a parent who is overly critical. Okay, and I don't know that this was necessarily the case with me, but I'll point out where it came from with me in a little while. But what I've seen probably most commonly with other people is that you have a parent who you just can't get anything right with them. You can't please them. You don't get a good job. You don't get a praise or a fascination or attention from them that would have your ego feel like, hey, this feels good, and I want more of this, and I do exist. Um, Many people do have parents like this, and I don't really have time to get into all the reasons why a parent might act that way, and even if we could explain it, it doesn't make it okay necessarily. But many people do grow up with that, and so uh, having having that really gets you this deep-seated belief that everything that comes from me is bad, or everything that comes from me is not good enough, and you hold on to that, and you may not even be aware that you have this belief until you really examine yourself or you hear somebody articulate it for you and identify that. So an overly critical parent would be one big common cause. Another common cause in terms of how you grew up that could lead to the lack of a healthy ego development is if you have a family member who demands a lot of attention. And this might be that they're literally demanding it, and that they might be narcissistic or just very self-centered or whatever. and make everything about them. It might have to do with addiction, and like the whole family revolves around their addiction and protecting their addiction or something like that. It might be because somebody is really ill and has a lot of physical needs, or a significant disability or something like that, where they really require a lot of attention. Maybe you had a sibling like this, and um, that, even though it's not necessarily that person's fault that they have these needs and these disabilities or something, um, the other people in that family, especially the other siblings, kind of get the idea that my needs need to not be considered so that we can focus on this person who has stronger needs, right? Um, or again, if somebody is more actively like, hey, it's all about me, basically, in the family, and this might go along with an overly critical parent, then that message starts to sink in, even if it's never been communicated to you explicitly, that your needs are not to be considered, that nobody cares about your opinion, but you start to imply that. And as a child, that becomes part of how your brain develops. For me, I think maybe the biggest cause was actually my religious upbringing. I was raised in a relatively conservative Christian environment, lots of involvement in the church, and I'm not bad mouthing religion or Christianity or conservatism completely in this video, but my particular experience of it was basically learning that, and it was a combination of the religious upbringing and just the way that my parents tended to raise me, and nobody was ill-intentioned in this picture, but I talk about this in that My Story podcast episode, where I got the idea that because of my parents' needs or my parents' goals and their activities and stuff like that, and I'm the oldest of four siblings, and so a relatively big family here, um, that other people appreciate it and other people are happier when I don't bother anyone, when I don't get in the way. And couple that with the evangelical upbringing that I had, that talks a lot about denying yourself, that talks about how without Jesus, we are very sinful and broken and not deserving of anything good. These are the kinds of messages that were communicated to me. And really, the idea, I think, behind it was to show how important Jesus is and how much we need Jesus in our lives. But the subtext there is that you are a worthless piece of crap and you're just kind of born into this, and there's nothing that you can do about it without the help of this outside force, right? And so you can see the functional aspects of that, and you can see the dysfunctional aspects of that kind of a message for a child to grow up with that. So that was my experience, and maybe there's somebody out there who has a similar experience to that as well. I'm sure there are other causes for the lack of a healthy ego development, but I would say those three, and especially those first two, are really common ones. So, what can we do to help? Well, uh, I'm a therapist, and I'm here to tell you that therapy is a great place to explore this and to identify this and to figure out how this looks in your life and what it means, and to get some professional support for starting to develop that healthy ego, even if it's in adulthood, and starting to get to really know yourself and become the fullest, best version of yourself by even having a self to begin with. And that's something that I've helped clients with on multiple occasions. And sometimes they come in the context of something completely different, but we start to see, hey, this seems to be a part of the issue here. Have you ever really even realized this, that this is going on, and starting to go from there. You don't necessarily need therapy to address this, but it would be helpful, I would say, in many cases. Oftentimes, it helps to heal trauma, and trauma, as I've said many times, doesn't always look like trauma. It might just be growing up in a household where your needs were not acknowledged or asked or met um, on a chronic basis. It's like this is just the way it always was, and I was very neglected or whatever. And I wasn't necessarily, you may not have been like abused or actively harmed, but you were inactively harmed. And you might need to process particular memories or feelings or beliefs regarding that and heal some of those things from the past. I implement EMDR therapy to help clients with these kinds of experiences. And there are other approaches as well that might be an even better fit for you. And then, so that would be probably in the context of therapy or finding some other way to try to process that trauma. Um, Another thing that can help a lot is mindfulness work. mindfulness a lot of times involves paying attention to the thoughts and the feelings, the physical experiences, the beliefs, these kinds of things that do exist in your mind. It's really, in some ways, there's different approaches. One has to do with like emptying and trying to get rid of all of those kinds of things. But you can also do it in a way where you're listening to that inner voice that is there. You're paying attention to your intuition and your tastes and your preferences, your thoughts. And through that kind of a practice, you can start to get to know yourself a little better and be aware of, hey, there is this part of me that actually does kind of want to do that. That's a new experience for me. Um, Along with that is practice. Like many things in life, practice makes perfect, or at least practice leads to improvement. And so, taking time in your life to reflect on what do I want in this situation, or hey, I'm starting to feel kind of angry, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's telling me something needs to change. That might tell me that I have an unmet need. What am I feeling angry about? Let's analyze that. Whether it's on your own at the end of the day, or in communication with somebody who loves and trusts you, or whatever, um, to try to practice like, what are my needs, what are my preferences, what are my desires and drives and goals here, to take time to reflect on that on a regular basis, at least once a day is a great thing, or really throughout your life, to try to practice. And it might take some time, like when somebody asks, where do you want to go to eat? It might be like, what do I want? Let me think about what I'm craving for once, instead of just uh, I wonder where they want to go, or hey, it's been a long time since we've been here, why don't we go here? What do I actually want? Let me ask that question. That's a form of practicing. And it is often in those simple little things that you start to develop um, a sense of who you are and what you do need and want. And I think the last thing that I want to leave you with is this idea that, okay, because I think for a lot of people, you might be hearing this, and especially maybe if you did grow up in a more religious upbringing or something like that. But even if you didn't, this is still communicated to many of us that uh, that to pay attention to your needs and your wants and your preferences and your drives and desires, that is selfishness, that is self-centeredness. And I will tell you that, okay, to some degree, it's self centeredness because you are asserting or getting to know yourself and um, reflecting on yourself. So I guess it can't be avoided that that is by definition self centeredness. But um, that once again, the goal here is not necessarily to make everything about you. Hey, look, beautiful snow. Not to make everything about you and to have a super overly powerful ego that dominates everybody else, right? That's not what we're talking about. That's not where we're going with this. We're going to, let's establish a foundation. Let's figure out who. The way that I think about it sometimes is like, who even is me? Who even? Because it's not like, who am I? Like, what's my identity? But it's like, where even do I come into it? Uh, and to really exist, to start to exist in your life, to show up to your life, to be able to live with true intention. You can't really live in these ways and be in these ways without a sense of who you are, without having any feeling that you really exist as a force here. Um, and we need you to be your best, fullest self to the best of your ability. We want you to show up, whoever you are watching this, the people in your life, you have something to contribute to every situation that you're in. So this is good for you and it's good for the world around you. And so I encourage you to, if you have identified with some of the concepts I've talked about in this video, to really consider the ways that having a healthy ego could be a beneficial thing. And then, maybe down the road, you can work on transcending that in an even more beneficial, beautiful way, if that's what you want to do. Okay. And a sort of phrase that I have found to be really helpful is, I am just as important as everybody else. Okay. Because that is not, I'm more important than everybody else. That keeps you in check with not being selfish and making everything about you and narcissistic or something like that. But it also says, hey, why would I be less important than everybody else? That doesn't make any sense. If I really believe that everybody, if I try to treat everybody the same and try to treat everybody with equal consideration. Obviously, some people might be more trustworthy or deserve your time and attention a little more than others. But like on a basic level, I think that a lot of people would say um, that we should all kind of start on a level playing field. So what about me? Why would I be the exception to that? I am just as important as everybody else. My needs are just as important as everybody else's needs. There might be times where we really need to focus in on somebody whose needs are more urgent. There might be times where my needs are more urgent, and I need to say, "Hey, over here, just to let you know, hey, could you help? Could you show me some support? Because we're friends here, we're family." There's a time where somebody's needs might need to transcend somebody else's needs, but to start at that place of everybody else is important and I am just as important as them. I feel like that's not a very a hard thing to to um, to jump onto, to grab onto, and to try to practice. Okay. Thank you for watching. I hope this video's been helpful for you. And my number is 586-576-6523 if you want to call or text me to set up a therapy appointment to work through these or other issues. My website is gfcounseling.com. That's for Growing Forward Counseling, gfcounseling.com. And I would love to explore some of this stuff with you and try to support you through it and help you really get to the best version of yourself. That's really, I think, the goal with all of my work. Even though I specialize in trauma and grief, but I work with clients on many issues, it's like I want to empower you to be the best you and for the world around you. I want us all to reach our potential to the best of our ability. Sometimes that means healing. Sometimes that means dealing with some difficult stuff. Sometimes that means how far can I go and how can um, how can I grow as far and as fast as I am able to. Wherever you're at on that spectrum, whatever needs you come in with, I'm here to try to meet you where you're at and take you to the next level, to the next step, whatever that looks like for you. So I'd love to hear from you on that. Thanks again for watching. Feel free to rewatch, to share this with somebody who you think might be helped by it. And I will catch you in the next video. Thanks.